Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
We have a really nice crowd here today. Thank you for being here. I have a sad announcement to make for those of you who don't know this already. Ernie's daughter, Joanne, passed away this week, and we want to keep them close in our hearts, in our thoughts, and in our prayers. And we will be moving forward to do something from the fellowship for the family, and we'll be letting you know the details on that as soon as we get that confirmed. But we do have a card for Ernie, and it's over on the welcome table. So if everyone would take a moment to sign that before you leave today, that would be great, because we want to get that to them as soon as possible to let them know that we were thinking about them. Also, I know we have some visitors today, so if you're a visitor, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
I have a visitor that has joined us. She's spending the weekend with us from Columbia, Ms. Bunny Harris.
Thank you.
Bunny is my partner in crime for a lot of things.
A lot of years.
Yeah, for a lot of years, and we're really glad to have her here to join us today. Anybody else? Any other visitors? No? Well, we are also very lucky today to have Derek Harrison filling in for Ernie. And one nice thing about this group is that everybody pulls together, and if you ask anyone to do anything, you always get a yes, unless it's serving on the board. I think that's a no. But for other things, people are so willing to step up and say, yes, I'll do food, yes, I can do this. And it was, yes, I'll be willing to fill in for Ernie today. And I don't know a whole lot about Derek's background, but I do know that he has 50 plus years of experience teaching at the college level, teaching ethics and philosophy in general. So I know that we're going to have a wonderful, inspiring message today, and we thank him for being here today and filling in for us.
I can't find a quote relating to altruism with the word in it anywhere. So I went back to my old roots, dictionary, Bartlett's, Roget. Definition of altruism: unselfish regard for or devotion to the welfare of others. Second to that is behavior by an animal that is not beneficial to or may be harmful to itself, but that benefits the survival of the species. Okay, maybe I can find a quote for that. Could not. So I picked one word, unselfish. And I did find that one in Roget. It's one of 20 subcategories of kindness and or benevolence. And it's lumped in with philanthropist, humanitarian, benevolist, man of goodwill, I don't know where the women are, do-gooder, well-doer, power for good, welfare worker, social worker, welfare statist, whatever that may be, almsgiver, almoner, and finally, at the very end, Robin Hood. And I thank you, Peter Mark Roget, for that one. So I'm not being terribly helpful to you, but I have one final little quote, sort of related. And Spock says, "Don't grieve, Admiral. It's logical. The needs of the many outweigh," and Captain Kirk butts in, "the needs of a few." And then Spock comes back with, "or the one." And that's from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Thank you, Barbara. for doing the first 5 minutes of my sermon. No, I'm going to come back to that. We'll read the chalice flagging next. We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. And now we have a song.
Now, Denver sings this. It's about time, and it's got 3 different verses, and they're about 3 different things we could be doing action for. The last one relates more to altruism. I hope there's a phone over in John, God who lives again. Who's to say you have to lose someone else to win? In the eyes of all the people, the look is just the same. For the first is just the last one. When you play a deadly game, it's about time we realize it. We're all in this together. It's about time we find out it's all of us or none. It's about time we recognize it. There's changes in the weather. It's about time. It's about changes. It's about time. There's a light in the Vatican window for all the world to see. And the voice cries in the wilderness. Sometimes it speaks for me. I suppose I love him most of all when he kneels to kiss the land. With his lungs upon our mother's breast, he makes his strongest stand. It's about time we start to see it. The earth is our only home. It's about time we start to face it. Can't make it here all alone. It's about time we start to listen to the voices in the wind. It's about time. It's about changes. It's about time. There's a man who is my brother. I just don't know his name. But I know his home and family, 'cause I know it feels the same. And it hurts me when he's hungry and when his children cry. I too am a father, that little one is mine. It's about time we begin it, turn the world around. It's about time we start to make it. The fame before it's known. It's about time we start to live it. The family of man. It's about time. It's about change. It's about time. It's about peace. It's about plenty. It's about time. It's about you and me together. It's about time.
Becky will begin what I have to say with a reading.
I looked in the back of the hymnal at the readings and found one under Goodness by Emily Dickinson. And these are the words. It's very short. She was a short poet. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain.
Thank you, Becky. I was kidding Barbara about having done some defining for me. I'm glad she did, because I was going to do the defining myself. I would just add to what Barbara read to you about altruism, that the opposite is usually called egoism, and that generally has a bad name. Probably it should have a bad name, but not entirely so. It has a bad name only if you equate it with selfishness, and that's not necessarily the case. I'm not going to go into philosophical arguments in favor of egoism. We're here to talk about altruism. And I want to say that the title of my talk today is really a little strange to me. I looked at it this morning and I said, why did I call it that? That sounds really boring. I hope it won't be. And I'm surprised anyone's here at all this morning with a title like that. In any event, altruism is in fact the idea that good action is that done on behalf of others, and egoism is that the right action is that which is done for one's own interest. I like to think of the two as a continuum, and that word is also in my title. A continuum, to remind you, is not a spectrum. A spectrum is a round thing, like a spectrum of colors with orange and yellow and so on. A continuum is a straight line, usually. Use in statistical analysis, for example, and it has an endpoint on either end. For example, you might say, in politics, one end of the continuum is right wing and one is left wing, and that sort of thing. We use continuums to analyze things, and they're not necessarily to be equated with averages. It's possible, and this is important to what I want to say today, it's possible that you have a continuum with more on one end than the other. I think that actions, right actions, which we study in ethics, actions which are either selfish or self-interested, better said, or altruistic, are not necessarily even. I happen to think, and I hope I'll get you to agree before I'm done, that there are more of us who are altruistic than there are who are egoistic. Now, I'm going to bring in Abraham Lincoln at the end here. He'll make the other case, by the way, but only in a certain way, so wait on that. In any case, that's why I call it altruism on a continuum, because I want you to realize that all of us are somewhere on that continuum with respect to how much we help others or how much we help ourselves. And I'm not here to make judgments about that. I'm just saying that it's good once in a while to think about us, about ourselves, and about those around us, and see where on that continuum we lie and where those around us lie. That's what that title is about. I'm going to begin with a story because some years ago I was asked to speak at an honors convocation at my college, and the colleague who asked me to speak didn't give me any directions. So I went back to him. I said, of course I'll speak to your honors students. But I went back to him after a few days, and I said, Lee, I'm having trouble getting started. I don't know quite what honors students are interested in. Obviously they're interested in studying, which is a good thing. But beyond that. So he said, just tell a story. People like stories. That'll get you started anyway. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's a very brief one. And it has to do with altruism. But because it's a story that features myself and another fellow, I want you to know that I'm going to talk much more about some other people with whom I've worked for a number of years, who to me are in fact the extreme end of that altruism continuum. But I'll get to that. I need to explain that for a number of years, back in the 90s and in the 2000s, I went down to Haiti. Haiti, as you may know, is in the Caribbean. It shares the island of Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic. Haiti is the poorest country in the hemisphere. In fact, we who go there to help out used to joke about the fact that no newscaster ever says the word Haiti without saying Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We decided that must be the name of the country. The name is actually the Republic of Haiti, but not for the news media. It is in fact a very poor country. And a number of us have gone down for years to help out in one way or the other. And that's the setting for this story. The work that I was doing down there over those years, I guess you would call it mostly hospice work. And I worked for the organization which you may recognize by the name the Missionaries of Charity. You That's the official name of Mother Teresa's organization. And so the people I worked with, you see now why I said they're on the extreme end of the altruism continuum. People who I worked were often, in fact, volunteers from this country. I took people down. I went by myself much of the time, but I took people down with me sometimes. And one of those people is sitting right over here, Becky. I took my daughter with me one time to help. I took a former student. I took some friends. And so I wasn't doing it by myself all the time. And there were a number of volunteers coming from this country and from Europe and elsewhere to help the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. There's lots to be done and lots to be often sadly experienced down there. In any case, I stayed at a guest house, and at night we would gather together and tell stories to each other and bolster each other in our altruistic efforts. And specifically, as I started to say, I worked in a hospice run by the Sisters of Mother Teresa right downtown in Port-au-Prince, the capital of Haiti. And this story takes place in that hospice. The hospice was, I think, an old school, possibly. I'm not even sure. Picture several rooms, a little smaller, each of them a little smaller than this room, so maybe they were classrooms. And in each room were maybe 20 or 30 beds, very simple beds, cots, really. And on each cot was a dying person. I worked in the men's wards, obviously, and there were women upstairs for the same purpose. Well, that's the background. The story's really quite short. One day I was there, and I was leaving at noon. We volunteers always work just until noon. And I was leaving, and I walked past 4 or 5 beds there along the wall where I'd been working on the men. What did we do? We often massaged them, we shaved them, we exercised their limbs, because they're lying on the bed and they're stiff and they're sore. And so just simple things like that. Whatever we could do, it's usually called palliative care, and whatever we could do, we would try to do for them. I walked by this one bed, and the little man lying on it, elderly and dying, said to me, "Monsieur, un massage, s'il vous plaît." He wanted a massage. He had been watching me work through the room through the morning, and it was his turn maybe. Well, it was 5 minutes to 12. Now that might not strike you as being very important, but it's very important in this case because the sisters always told us volunteers, and in fact warned us, to be sure we clear out by noon. Because there was a small room like that one back there, we had medications in it and records and so on. And it had, above all, it had a sink, cold water going in. And that sink was important to us to wash our hands. We'd been working all morning with people with every possible kind of disease. And if you really wanted to get malaria or tuberculosis or any number of other things of that sort, that's a good place to spend your time. I did get scabies once, by the way, that was somewhere else. I wasn't even in Haiti. So the nuns locked the door at noon because they want to go back to their convent, take a break, have a lunch, maybe they say some prayers, and do whatever nuns do in the middle of the day. And so we needed to get to that room, especially if you got a backpack in there, or you left your backpack maybe when you came to work that morning. It was 5 to 12 when this man asked me for the massage. I looked down at him, and I couldn't explain all this to him after all. My Creole wasn't all that great at that time. So I started to say no. Then I said yes. I thought, never mind washing my hands. The problem is, it's an hour-long walk and ride up to the hill where I lived in the afternoon, and that's a long time to have hands that could have almost anything on them if you're sensitive to those matters. But I said yes, and I did give him some help for maybe 20 minutes, and I went home without washing my hands. It wasn't that big a deal. Well, that's the story, except for the ending of the story. I went back the next morning, and at some point or other, I was back in that room again, and I went over to his bed because I wanted to say hello to him. It was empty. You know what I'm going to say next? There was a guy named Woody on the bed next to his, and Woody spoke English because he lived in Brooklyn for a while, and I said, Woody, where's this guy gone to? I thought maybe he had gone out for a little, maybe somebody helped him get up and take him for a walk outside in the courtyard. No, he said he died. I said, what? He died. I said, when did he die? Well, I don't know what he said, maybe 3 o'clock. Within 3 hours of my helping him, he was dead. Now, that's the end of the story, but there is the moral to the story, and I think it's clear to you, or if it isn't, I'll say it for you. The moral is, if you have a chance to do something for someone else, do it. Because you don't know if that chance is going to come again. What would I have felt like if I had gone home without helping that little man, and then gone back and been told that he died? How would I have felt about that? Well, I got lucky, didn't I? You know, I said the right thing, and for once in my life, maybe I did the right thing, and that's the end of the whole matter. I want to focus now on what I really want to talk about, and that is the sisters, and the brothers, by the way, too, of Mother Teresa. The sisters had a place in which I used to work, and then later on I moved over across town to a similar facility, a hospice and a clinic that the brothers of Mother Teresa run. I liked it better there because it's a rougher part of town and I didn't get much help. I could work with the men better maybe than with the sisters. They were very kind and pleasant, but I liked it better. So when I say the sisters and brothers, I mean that Mother Teresa, if you didn't know this, has both genders in her organization. In any case, in the course of working there a number of years with the sisters and then with the sisters and brothers later on, I got to know them a little bit. They're not terribly friendly because they're busy and they're focused on their altruistic work. But they would talk once in a while. And what I found out about them is, what I said a few moments ago to you, they really are on the extreme end of the altruistic spectrum. They're giving their whole lives to this work. And the lives they live are, I hardly tell you, quite simple. I mean, quite simple. They have almost nothing for themselves. They live in a convent right there on the property. Their brothers, I had a house on their property as well. And I got to know the brothers better, I started saying, because later on, they would have me into lunch. I was a regular there, and I'd go to lunch. And I got to know them. In fact, I even got to know them so well, one invited me to come down to Medellin, Colombia, and work with them down there. And so I did. And I can tell you, in a word, the lives of the sisters and the brothers in that situation consist of two things: praying and working with the poor. That's all they do. Now, I'm not saying we should feel bad about that, not at all. I'm just saying that I'm talking about that extreme end of this continuum that I began talking about. That's how they live, and that's how they, apparently, how they die. Are they happy? I think they are. But I'll save that for later as well. Now, I want to say that I can't stress enough, this is so bad it's almost funny, stress enough the simplicity of their lives and the sacrifice of their lives for other people. For this case, for the poor. In this case, for the poor and the dying. I talked to one day, and somewhat older sister from, I think from Canada, as I recall, and we were working together briefly and talking, and she was excited because her parents were coming to see her. And I said, that's terrific, and I said, so when do you get to go to see them? When will you have some vacation time? And she said, oh, quite happily. She said, oh, we get vacation time every 10 years. And I almost laughed, but it was a serious conversation. And she was serious. Every 10 years. So just in case you think they're goofing off, they're not. They live a very austere life, a very dedicated life, and have the admiration of the world, I think, as Mother Teresa did herself. So the thing, she gets the attention. She didn't want the attention, but she gets it. They don't get it. And so I wanted to tell you that there are people who are on that other end of the continuum, and many more like that. You don't have to be religious to they are, of course. There's the Catholic faith we're talking about in this case. There are people all over the world who are doing all kinds of altruistic things, and all those people are also in this room. I insist upon that. Maybe you don't give your lives to the dying in some faraway land. I don't either. But we do an awful lot for other people. And so whatever else I have to say today, keep that in mind. That's my strong conviction. What I'd like to do for a few minutes is just consider those nuns a little further, and anyone like them and ask questions about their motivation. Why do they do it? Why would you, as a young woman, decide that you would do nothing except work in hot and somewhat dangerous conditions with dying people, with vacation every 10 years? Well, one obvious answer is heavenly reward. These are people of great faith. I guess they believe, I didn't ask for this, I guess they believe that whatever privations they may suffer now in this world and whatever sacrifices they may make in this world, they will be rewarded with eternal happiness. Well, I don't know about that myself, but I'm glad they do know about it. It must be a major motivating factor for them to live the way they do within those conditions and to do it every day. Heavenly reward is one thing. Whether we share that with them or not is not for us to worry about. The second thing I listed was, this is going to sound a little bit too practical maybe. Often these young women are from India, where Mother Teresa had her, Calcutta, where she had her headquarters. She was not from Calcutta, she was from Macedonia, by the way, but she's associated with India and with Calcutta especially. My guess is that most of them are among the poorer, that is the lower classes in that class-riven society of India. And so all I'm trying to say here is that second motivating factor may be just that they don't have a lot of choice. They're not going to go to college. They're not going to go to school at all, if they're in the countryside especially. They're never going to have a job of any sort, the way you and I have had. They'll get by, as people in India do get by, but that's all. So I'm thinking that maybe, and if this sounds like I'm being cynical, I don't mean to be, it just may be that some of them say to themselves, I could do a lot worse than join that organization and get 3 meals a day and a room to sleep in and have medical care and all those kinds of things that we take for granted in our more advanced society. So that might be a second reason that doesn't apply to us. Third reason is a better one, I think. And that's just that old Greek word, sympathy. It comes from the word for together, sym, as in symphony, and pathos, which means feeling. Sometimes also used for the word disease. When you are sympathetic, you are together in feeling with whoever you're with at that point. I'd like to think that when we act altruistically, including the sisters I'm talking about and the brothers, we're doing so out of sympathy for suffering. And there's plenty of that around, as you all know, in your own lives. We've seen that this week on, and in the lives of, especially those in the poor countries. I'd like to think the sisters, whatever their thoughts about heavenly reward may be, or whatever their desire to have a steady job, if you want to call it that, whatever those things may be the case, that they are simply people of great sympathy for those who are suffering. And that, to me, is the most admirable thing about it. The simplest answer I can think of to the question, why would you help others, is itself a question. I was taught maybe at some point that you shouldn't, that it's rude to answer a question with a question. But if someone said to me, why did you do X or Y, I would say, why wouldn't I have done X or Y? In other words, altruism to me should be self-evident. Whatever your motives are, however much you are, like a 10 of them that way or that way, the reason to do something good is because it's something good. I'm sorry to insult you this morning with the obvious. I spent hours teaching these things in classes and debating and reading books about these matters. But sometimes the answers are really quite simple. You help someone because they need help. If you don't, that's your business. But it seems to me that there's nothing more to it than that. You help someone because they need help. Now, almost maybe the third time that all of us in this room have acted on behalf of other people many, many times. And I want to ask you two questions about that. Have we needed, when we've done that, when we've done acts of altruism in the course of the day, or the week, or the month, have we asked ourselves the question, why? Have we had to analyze and discuss in our own minds our motives? Second question is, have we made a big deal out of it? I submit that both answers are no. When you've helped someone, you haven't spent a lot of time analyzing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you haven't also gone around bragging about it. You just do it. Altruism's best justification is in the action, not in what I'm saying to you right now, for example, or books, or articles, or sermons, or anything like that. I think we know intuitively that we are happier when we act altruistically. I'm sure that's been your experience. What is happiness? Well, leave that to the philosophers. But we are happier when we act altruistically, just as I would have been unhappier had I not helped that man on that cot that morning. I said I bring Lincoln into the discussion, Abraham Lincoln, to give a little different view of things here. I want to upset my continuum just a moment. I said it's those extremes in terms of right behavior. There's a story about Lincoln discussing this very matter and identifying himself as an ethical egoist, not an altruist. I was on a train going somewhere out of Washington, D.C., and Delaware somewhere where he came from, and he at one point, his friend on the train with him was arguing the altruist point of view. Lincoln was arguing the egoist point of view. And at one point, Lincoln made the train stop. And he got off, and he went out into a field right along the track where there were some pigs stuck in the mud. And he helped the pigs get out of the mud. And then he got back on the train. And his friend said, "See, I told you that was altruism. And you did it. You undid your own argument." And Lincoln said, "No, I didn't. You know why I helped those pigs? Because I was heading home. I didn't want to go to bed tonight, having to say to myself, they're still stuck in the mud." Now that, in case I don't make myself clear, is self-interest. That's self-interest. And to make this point, because as I got thinking about my continuum that I keep coming back to, I began to think that maybe it undoes itself. That maybe, as I like to think, altruism is a win-win situation, as the story from Lincoln tells us. When you help somebody, they get helped. That could be medical or financial or emotional, it could be 100 different ways. And you help yourself because you've done something needed to be done as best you could do it. And so that's why I'm calling it a win-win situation. And so by that analysis, ethical egoists become altruists. They're helping not only the person who needs the help, but they're helping themselves as well. Again, without bragging about it, just feeling better about what they did. So forget that continuum. Just forget it. It doesn't maybe any longer exist. In the end, it's about peace of mind, you know. Life is about peace of mind. The more that we have, the better off we are, and the less we have, the worse off we are. And I think altruism is a very good way to achieve at least some measure of peace of mind. That's been my experience. I want to stop now and change direction just a tiny bit. We are here, as Lisa reminded us this morning, in a somewhat sad time. The death of Joanne Mills is on our minds, and certainly on my mind. And as I prepared these remarks a couple nights ago, I was thinking about her, and I sent some condolences. I believe she had not quite died, but she was very near to die, and I knew that. And I sent some condolences to Murray, but I said, "Could you tell me anything about Alyssa?" I'm sorry, about Joanne. somehow tie into what I'm going to say on Sunday. And he came back immediately with a text message for me. When I asked him, is there anything you can tell me about your daughter that might be helpful to me? He said, Joanne was a nurse, I'm quoting, and a fierce advocate for her patients. She had that reputation. She also had a big heart for those who were struggling. She kept several pairs of socks and canned foods in her car, ready to give any homeless person she saw standing on the street corner. Did I tell you a few minutes ago that you can find altruism anywhere you look, that we all do altruistic acts? But I want to ask you, and this is always fun you have to ask, how many of you know anyone who keeps canned goods in their car and socks? I don't, but she did. So if you want examples of altruism, there's one. Ernie, I said, thank you. I thanked Ernie, and he said, I asked him, here's what you wrote. He said, of course. And he said, I would be honored if you read that, and she would be too. In reading up on the topic, I came across so many quotes about altruism, so many profound things that were said by our great philosophers. And I think the one I want to end with is a simple one by Albert Schweitzer. You may know Schweitzer was a medical doctor, physician who ran a hospital in Africa. Haiti, in fact, has an Albert Schweitzer hospital not far from Port-au-Prince, so they're all over the world by now. And of all the things that I could read to you, I want to read this from Schweitzer also. He said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among you who will ever be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Now, we have a song.
We know that most of you know this song, so we want loud voices. Fellow man, lend us a helping hand, put a little love in your heart. You see it's getting late, oh please don't hesitate, put a little love in your heart, and the world will be a better place, and the world will be a better place for you and me as we wait and see. Put a little love in your heart. You know the world is only people that hate your door. Put a little love in your heart, and the world will be a better place, and the world will be a better place for you and me. Just wait and see. Take a good look around, and if you're looking down, put a little love in your heart. I hope when you decide kindness will be your guide, put a little love in your heart. Okay, then the world will be a better place, then the world will be a better place for you and me. Just wait and see. Put a little love in your heart. Put a little love in your heart. Put a little love in your heart.
We extinguish the flame of this chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again. We have time for discussion if you like, or we can eat. I need Becky here to listen for me. Go ahead, Sally.
Go ahead, Annie, you've got the mic.
Thank you. Your sermon brought to mind probably the one experience that I had. Years ago, when there was still train travel, I was on a trip going north, and at a break, we did have a break because I guess there was a change in trains, but a lot of us are just standing around outside, didn't go inside. And I noticed this couple over on the side standing separate from everyone, and they were obviously distressed. She was crying, and well, I could just see they were both very upset. They had a baby. I looked at the baby. Baby looked okay. So I went up to them, and he said, my wallet. I've lost my wallet. And it's everything, of course, we had to continue this trip. So quickly I looked around, and I could see everybody standing around. So I started going up to people, and I said, this couple that's on the train with us, and told them what's happened, what their situation was. So let's give a collection. And so they did. And so I managed to, in the time that I had, which wasn't very long, I managed to get, I don't remember the sum, but I did have a nice collection, and I gave it to them. So what did I get out of that? I think it's because of course I could put myself in their shoes and think, what would I do if I was in a situation like that? So that was, I suppose, my motive. It was still my self-interest, but I could project onto someone else.
Thank you. Yes, Robert.
I'm just rereading one of my favorite books, The Power of Myth, which was edited by Bill Moyers about Joseph Campbell. And he's very big about heroes from all of his study in myth. And he said the difference between a celebrity and a hero is a celebrity will do things for himself, and the hero does something for society.
Thank you.
Ironically, last night I just happened to read in the most recent issue of Sierra Club magazine, they have a long article about altruism. And they too define it, but they wanted to make readers realize how important it is to extend the definition. I love Becky's quote about putting the robin back in the nest, because they wanted to extend that definition to include organizations and people that are fighting so hard against climate change and all, because it's going to affect all of us as one. And it was really a fascinating article. I recommend it to everyone to read.
I was thinking about what you were saying about the Sisters of Charity and my exposure growing up in a parochial Catholic school. I was around a lot of nuns, and of course they were always encouraging missionary work. And I, after school, at high school, I worked at the hospital, pediatrics. But I always wondered, why was there no happiness? It was the three, poverty, chastity, and obedience. And the selfish self was always not priority, to the point that you just questioned it all the time. Why? And now, when some of us use bits and pieces of the Bible, or we come and we read AARP, saying, take care of yourselves so you can reach out and help others. And it was like, that it's a no-brainer. I mean, how can we not first take care of ourselves? And then the wonderful quote of paying it forward. There is nothing, to me, there's nothing wrong with, I want to help somebody because I've been helped before. And there will be times when somebody will help me. So I think of Mother Teresa because that was drilled in us quite a bit. And as a young girl growing up, and of course they wanted us to draft us in the convent, it was always, but no one seemed happy. And it was like that self-care is just so important. That's my thought.
Yes, Jim?
Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Didn't say love your neighbor more than yourself. It presumes that you have to love yourself if you're going to love your neighbor. So self-care, echoing what she said, self-care is very good. I think our motives are always mixed. I'm aware anytime that I do something for somebody else that it's going to make me feel good. And I'm also aware that it helps them. So I think in most things our motives are mixed. And one little story. I was in New York City with one of my daughters who lives there, and we were having a nice meal. And when we finished, she had about half of her meal left, and she had it boxed up to take home. I thought, when we left the restaurant, she took it down to give it to a homeless person. And it's something I would have never thought to do.
I'm sorry to share twice, but my mind turned to the debate now about immigration in this country. And I want to share, like you, I spent a summer in Medellin, Colombia, and saw the poverty of people living there. And I worked with a woman when I was at Tufts from Haiti who had fled during Papa Doc's regime and came to this country. And as a result of my stay in Medellin, my brother was working in the Peace Corps there in the 60s. He asked how he could help a certain family that was literally dirt poor. I mean, they had, dirt floors in their little protected one-room shack. And they asked that my parents sponsor one of them to come to the States. They had to have a sponsor to get into the United States, which would change their life forever because one member of the family could come and get a decent job to send money back home to support that entire family. And the same thing happened with this woman from Haiti. She was able to get out during Papa Doc's regime and come here and get a decent paying job at Tufts so she could send money back for the rest of the family. And in my mind, there's no question about people coming to this country who are just trying to survive.
I read something the other day about, goes with Jared's story about the massage for the man. Someone named Og Mandino, who I meant to look up, but he said, treat everybody that you meet, everybody you run into, as if they were going to die tonight, and see how that changes your life.
Yeah. I almost learned a hard lesson. Almost learned a hard lesson.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so Claire could talk twice, I would too.
Sally.
Sally, sorry. When have you ever needed someone to be altruistic to you? You know, that's something that we didn't talk about, us being altruistic to somebody else, but when have you needed someone? I remember I went to visit my daughter in Washington, D.C., and as I was getting dropped off at the airport, I just gave her all the cash in my wallet, and I said, here, take this. I don't need it, I'm getting on the plane. And then I realized that I had been dropped off at the wrong airport, and I needed to take a cab to the airport. And so I walked up to this gentleman in a business suit, and I said, here's my story, if you give me $20, I promise, and your card, I promise you I'll mail it to you. And he did. And so I got to the airport, and when I got home, I mailed it to him, and it turned out he lived in New Orleans, and Katrina hit, and he didn't get the money for months and months and months, but he finally did. And so sometimes you need someone to be altruistic to you.
Well, the coffee's getting cold, right? Oh, wait, one more thing. Are we supposed to read something? That is? Okay, good. We're done. Oh.